Miracle is taking place across the country as eyewitnesses are capturing what they claim are giant angels in the clouds on their phones.
That the purpose of finding all these archaeological sites is to bring the Bible to life.
Something is happening in the sky, and people don't know how to explain it. A massive figure appeared above a city. Wings, shape, movement, all caught from different angles. Not one video, not two, dozens. And then, just days later, everything changed. The sky went dark, water started rising, streets disappeared. Now here's the question no one wants to answer. Was that just a coincidence or a warning? Now here's where things start to get even harder to ignore, because it wasn't just one person who saw it. Clips started appearing from different parts of the city, different streets, different angles, different times, but the same exact figure, still there, floating, unmoving, almost deliberate. One video shows it glowing slightly against the sky. Another shows the outline sharper, like the wings are stretched wide. And in another clip, the shape looks even clearer. Not random, not broken, structured. That's the part people couldn't explain. Clouds don't hold that kind of form for long. They shift, they fade, they break apart. But this didn't. It stayed, long enough for people to notice, long enough for people to question what they were seeing. And once those videos started spreading, the reactions changed. At first, it was curiosity, then confusion, and then something else. Because when multiple people see the same thing at the same time from different places, it stops being easy to dismiss. Some said it was just a rare cloud formation. Others said it could be light, shadows, or atmosphere playing tricks. But not everyone believed that, because there was one detail people kept coming back to: the wings. Not just wide, but shaped. Defined in a way that didn't look random, almost like layers, like something designed, not formed. And that's when the conversation started shifting from what is that to something much deeper. What if this isn't natural? Because once that idea enters your mind, everything starts to feel different. And what happened next is where things took a serious turn. At this point, people weren't just watching anymore, they were reacting. You can hear it in the video. Voices shaking, confusion turning into silence. Some people just stood there, staring. Others kept repeating the same thing over and over. Do you see that? Because it didn't feel normal. Not just strange, but heavy. Like something about it didn't sit right. And the longer it stayed in the sky, the harder it became to ignore. This wasn't a quick moment. It didn't flash and disappear. It lingered, almost like it wanted to be seen. And that's what made it unsettling. Because random things don't usually last that long. But this did. Long enough for people to feel it. And that feeling, it wasn't excitement. It was tension. You can hear it when someone zooms in. Their voice drops, their words slow down, like they're trying to understand something but can't. And then you start noticing something else. People aren't laughing anymore. They're not joking. They're quiet. Because deep down, something feels off. And when something feels off like that, people start looking for meaning. That's when the theories began. Some said it was just nature doing something rare. Others said it had to be something more. Something intentional. Something with meaning. And then, one idea started spreading faster than anything else. Not because it was proven, but because it felt possible. What if this wasn't just something in the sky? What if it was a sign? Because if it is, then the timing of what happened next changes everything. And then it happened. At first, it didn't seem connected. Just rain. Heavy, steady, nothing unusual. But it didn't stop. Hours passed, then more hours. The streets started filling. Drains couldn't keep up. Water began to rise, slow at first, then faster. Cars started disappearing under it. Sidewalks vanished. Roads turned into rivers, and people realized this wasn't normal rain. This was something else. Videos started coming in again, but this time it wasn't the sky, it was the ground. Families standing at their doors, watching water rush toward them, voices calling for help, people trapped inside homes. The water kept rising and rising. Some areas were completely swallowed, entire streets gone. No clear roads, no safe paths, just water everywhere. And the speed of it, that's what scared people the most, because it didn't give time, no warning, no space to prepare. One moment, everything was fine from completely different parts of the world. Floods in places that don't usually flood like this. Water rising fast, streets gone in hours. And it wasn't just water. In some regions, the weather flipped in ways people had never seen before. Places known for heat, suddenly dealing with cold. Areas that rarely see storms getting hit again and again. And people started noticing something strange. These weren't isolated events anymore. They were happening close together. Too close. And that's when the conversation shifted again from "that's unfortunate" to "why is this happening everywhere?" Because when one place floods, it's a disaster. But when multiple places start showing the same pattern, it becomes something else, something harder to ignore. Some people said it's just climate. Others said it's coincidence. But not everyone agreed, because the timing still didn't sit right. Sky event, then disaster, then more disasters, spreading. And once you start connecting those dots, even if you don't want to, a pattern begins to form. And humans are wired to notice patterns, even when they're uncomfortable, even when they raise questions we don't want to ask. Because if these things are connected, then it's not random. And if it's not random, then what is it? That's when a different kind of explanation started gaining attention. Not scientific, not political, but something older, something written long before any of this happened. And once people started bringing that into the conversation, everything took a much deeper turn. This is where things stop being just about events and start becoming about meaning. Because once people began connecting patterns, they started looking for answers. Not in the news, not online, but in something much older. Texts that have been around for generations. Words that talk about science. Warnings. Moments when the sky and the earth don't behave the way they should. And one idea kept coming up again and again. That before major change, there would be signs. Not small ones. Clear ones, seen by many, in the sky and on the ground. Some people pointed to passages that describe strange things appearing above. Others focused on what happens after, chaos, floods, fear spreading across cities. Now, whether someone believes those words or not, the similarities are what caught attention, because the pattern sounded familiar. Something appears, then something follows, and people begin to feel like things are out of order. That's exactly what was happening. The sky event didn't make sense. The floods didn't feel normal. And now more places were starting to experience similar problems. That combination is what made people pause. Because it's one thing to see something strange. It's another thing to see it followed by something destructive. And it's something else entirely when it keeps happening. That's when the idea started settling in. What if these aren't just random events? What if they're signals? Not loud, not obvious, but enough to make people stop and look closer. Because if that's true, then we're not just watching events unfold, we're watching something build. And if it's building, then the next part hasn't happened yet. And that's the part people are starting to worry about. At this point, the question isn't what happened anymore. It's what does it mean? Because when you line everything up, the figure in the sky, the timing, the sudden disaster, and the pattern spreading beyond one place, it starts to feel like more than coincidence. And this is where opinions split. Some people still say it's random, that these things happen, that the world has always had strange weather and rare events. And that's true. But others aren't convinced anymore because of how close everything is happening, how fast, how connected it feels. And that's where one idea begins to stand out. Not proven, not confirmed, but hard to ignore. What if this is the beginning of something bigger? Not one event, not two, but a chain, a sequence, where one thing leads into another, and each one gets harder to explain. Because if that's the case, then we're not at the end of the story. We're at the start of it. And that's what makes this unsettling. Because beginnings don't show everything at once. They reveal things slowly, step by step. And right now, it feels like we've only seen the first step. That thought alone changes how people see everything, because it's no longer about looking back at what happened. It's about looking forward and asking, if this is just the beginning, then what comes next? At some point, watching isn't enough anymore, because once you start seeing patterns, you can't unsee them. And that's where people begin to reflect. Not just on what's happening out there, but on what it might mean for them. Because if these are signs, then they're not just meant to be seen. They're meant to be noticed, understood, taken seriously. And that idea makes people pause, because it shifts the focus from the sky to something more personal. Some people start asking questions they never asked before about meaning, about purpose, about whether things are really as random as they seem. Others start looking deeper, trying to understand if there's something behind all of this, something guiding it or warning through it. And even if someone doesn't fully believe that, there's still one thing that's hard to ignore: the timing. Because everything we've seen so far didn't happen years apart. It's happening close together, fast. And when things move that quickly, it usually means something is changing, whether we understand it or not. And that brings us back to the same question, not about what already happened, but about what's coming. Because if this is a buildup, then the next step matters more than the first. And right now, it feels like we're standing right in between both. Here's the part that keeps people thinking even after everything settles down. Because when you go back and look at it carefully, there's something that doesn't quite add up. The timing is too close. The sequence is too clean. First, the sighting, clear enough for many people to see, long enough for it to spread. Then the shift, weather changing, rain building, pressure rising. And then impact, fast, overwhelming, hard to control. That pattern, it's what people can't shake because it feels structured, almost like steps. And when something follows steps like that, it makes people wonder, was it building up or were we just late to notice it? And then there's another detail, one that doesn't get talked about as much: how calm everything was before it happened. No warning signs that stood out, no clear signal that something big was about to hit. Just normal until it wasn't. And that's what makes it harder to trust the idea that this is random. Because random events don't usually line up this cleanly, but this did. And that's why people keep going back to the same thought. Not loudly, not confidently, but quietly. What if this was meant to happen this way? Not caused, not controlled, but aligned. Because if events can line up like this once, they can line up again. And that's the part no one can predict. Because if there is a next moment, we won't see it coming the same way. And that brings us to the one thing no one has an answer for yet. What happens when the next sign appears? Right now, everything feels quiet again. The sky looks normal, the streets are slowly recovering, people are going back to their routines. But something has changed, because once you've seen something like that, you don't forget it. You don't look at the sky the same way again, and you don't ignore patterns the way you used to. Because now there's a question sitting in the back of people's minds. Not loud, not constant, but always there, waiting. What if that wasn't the only sign? What if it was just the first one? Because if there's one thing we've learned from all of this, it's that nothing arrived alone. One moment led to another, and another, step by step. So if that pattern continues, then something else is coming. Maybe not the same, maybe not in the same place, but connected in a way we won't fully understand at first. And when it happens, it might look small, easy to dismiss, just like the first one. But this time, more people will notice. Because now, people are watching, waiting, looking up just a little longer than before, trying to see if anything feels off. And one day, someone will notice something again, something they can't explain, something that doesn't move the way it should, something that stays just long enough to be seen. And when that happens, the question won't be, what is that? It will be, is this the next sign?